Welcome to Third Eye View, a podcast where enlightenment gets to be entertaining, and today we are exploring one of the most iconic cards in the tarot deck, the Magician. The Magician is a master of manifestation. He stands at the threshold between thought and reality, but this archetype didn't emerge from nowhere. Behind the Magician is a much older figure, which is the Alchemist. The Magician is a seeker of hidden knowledge, and if you start looking closely, you'll notice that this archetype is everywhere, from fantasy novels to superhero films to science fiction epics. So today, on this episode, we will explore the symbolism of the Magician card, how you can use the essence of this card in real life, the historical roots of the Alchemist archetype, and of course, the many ways that this figure appears in modern pop culture. All this and more right after this. This episode is brought to you by Creative Alchemy. You know that creative project you've been thinking about? The podcast idea sitting in your notes app? The book you swear you're going to write someday? The brand, concept, or passion project that is just a little too big for you to handle alone? That is exactly what Creative Alchemy is for. Creative Alchemy is a creative consulting space that works one-to-one with storytellers, creatives, entrepreneurs, and multi-hyphenates to turn ideas into actual, tangible projects. If you have been dreaming about launching a podcast, writing a book, building a creative brand, or finally just bringing an idea to life, Creative Alchemy helps you move from inspiration to momentum. Using a blend of creative strategy, storytelling, astrology, hypnosis, and subconscious tools, Creative Alchemy helps you uncover your voice, move through blockages, and build projects that actually feel aligned and sustainable to maintain. Using a blend of creative strategy, storytelling, astrology, hypnosis, and subconscious tools, Creative Alchemy helps you uncover your voice, move through blockages, and build projects that actually feel aligned and sustainable for your energy. To learn more, head to the show notes and book your free consultation today. Welcome back to Third Eye View. I am Julia Rose Portela, your guide and host today as we dive into the Magician card in tarot. We are working with the Rider-Waite tarot deck as we go through this particular stretch of episodes. So if you want a tarot deck to follow along, you can, of course, buy your own. But the link to get the Rider-Waite tarot deck, which is what I am using as we go through, that will be in the show notes. So let's talk about the Magician. The Magician stands before a table holding 4 symbols of the minor arcana: a cup, pentacle, a sword, and a wand. Now, these represent the 4 elements: water, earth, air, and fire. In other words, the Magician has access to every tool necessary for creation. He's resourceful. He has everything that he needs in order to create whatever it is that he may be wanting to create at a particular moment in time. Beyond that, he realizes that all 4 elements are necessary in balance to create whatever he wants. Cups or water connect to our emotional landscape and our relationships. Pentacles or earth connect to our physical material world. The sword or air connect to our mental acuity, and wands or fire connect to our vitality and our spiritual essence. Above his head floats the infinity symbol, suggesting limitless potential and divine intelligence. He's also got an aura of white light surrounding him, showing that he is divinely protected as he co-creates whatever it is that he's creating with spirit. The infinity symbol above his head just adds to that, and that ideology is then repeated in his belt, which is an Ouroboros, a snake eating its own tail. Both the infinity symbol and the Ouroboros represent life, death, and rebirth, the cycle of the phoenix, which is the ultimate master of alchemy as it can birth itself anew from its own ashes. The infinity symbol sits above the crown chakra in what we would call the star chakra, It's not often discussed, but that chakra is what is connected to our super consciousness or to spirit. The snake sits at the magician's sacral chakra, and this is the center of creation. So we're working again with super consciousness and creation in our lower chakras or the physical world. One of the magician's hands points towards the heavens, the other points downward towards earth. This gesture echoes the ancient Hermetic phase, as above, so is below. This is connected to the universal law of correspondence, which emphasizes that our outer world, what we experience in our day-to-day reality, is correlated to our internal thoughts, feelings, and beliefs, which means that, like the magician, we have the power to alchemize those internal beliefs, ideas, feelings into an external reality that actually matches what we are experiencing. So the magician acts as a channel between spirituality, aka as above, and the material world, aka so is below. He takes ideas, intuition, energy, and inspiration, and he gives them physical form. Like the Fool, his card is predominantly yellow, connecting him to the solar plexus chakra and highlighting his confidence in his ability. Flowers bloom all around him, symbolizing growth and manifestation. And there is a near mirror image, roses above, roses below, showing that he is, once again, a channel for divine inspiration. As above, so is below. However, below him, with the roses, are also white lilies, which shows that the creative ideas that come in from spirit do end up taking on their own shape through the channel of the artist, the alchemist, or the creator, whoever is being the alchemist in that moment. The white and red color scheme are also echoed throughout the card. So the white robe represents purity of intention and is connected directly to spirit or source. The red cloak represents passion, action, and desire, and is connected to our root chakra or earth. So let's dive into the history of the alchemist archetype. This archetype stretches back thousands of years. Alchemy emerged from a fusion of Egyptian mysticism, Greek philosophy, early chemistry, astrology, of course. Don't worry, we'll talk about it in later podcasts, and also spiritual traditions from the Islamic Golden Age and from medieval Europe. Historically, alchemists were people tend to imagine them trying to turn lead into gold. And yes, some literally did pursue that goal, but symbolically, alchemy was always about something that was much deeper. Alchemy and transformation are words that should be synonymous. The transformation of matter or the transformation of self, which is oftentimes what an alchemist was trying to do. The legendary Philosopher's Stone wasn't merely a magical object. It got turned into that through mythology, though it once represented the ability to transform oneself and now has sort of alchemized in its own form into the idea of enlightenment, perfection, immortality, and spiritual awakening. Many historians connected alchemical ideas to the writings attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, which was a mythical fusion of the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth. Hermetic philosophy taught that hidden laws govern reality, and understanding that grants people power and wisdom. That means that the alchemist archetype is able to understand that knowledge creates power, that symbols and words shape our reality, and that consciousness itself can transform the world. Real historical figures have been tied to this archetype. For example, Nicolas Flamel, Saint Germain, and perhaps most interestingly, Franz Toussaint, who was a German alchemist who famously attempted to turn lead into gold in the 90s and then used that scheme that he was doing, which it was a scheme, to deceive investors, and even going so far as trying to use that money to fund the Nazi Party with his projected gold output through this process of alchemy. He falls most closely into the original 15th century depiction of Tarot's magician, which was the Il Bagatto, or the juggler. Tarot has really strong ties to Italy, so Il Bagatto is that original form, and it's a figure that is depicted as a street performer, specifically a con man. By the 17th century, the ideology of tarot had spread into France, was becoming more renowned there. And this idea of the magician continued on there with le batelier. That is a charlatan, for example. So kind of pushing in on the same theming. 19th century kind of transformed what the magician was seen as in tarot, and this is where it becomes a little bit more of the magician that we know today. It's introducing the concept of the magician as a master of occult forces. And then by the time we get to Rider-Waite, which is the 20th century, 1910, we are in a cemented version of the modern experience of what this archetype will be, fully depicted as the alchemist, totally wrapped up in esoteric knowledge. Psychologist Carl Jung later interpreted alchemy as a symbolic map of psychological growth. To Jung, alchemy represented the process of individuation, or the idea that transformation of the fragmented self could be unified into a whole experience of self. And in this sense, the magician is not simply just a spellcaster, though that is how it is perceived sometimes in pop culture. He is the ultimate archetype of human potential. Now, let's talk about the magician as an archetype, because across mythology and storytelling, the magician appears in many forms. Oftentimes, if the fool is the hero of the hero's journey, this is somebody that the fool encounters to get the resources, skills, tools, things that he needs in order to move forward on his journey. There's some sort of moral test usually that the alchemist or the magician puts us through. But the magician can appear in many forms. It could be a wizard, an inventor, a scientist, a mentor, a trickster, a hacker in modern world. It could be somebody who is incredibly visionary. And of course, it could be a con artist if we're going in the more shadow side of things. What unites all of those different characters or different types of characters is that they tend to understand hidden systems within the story that they are occupying, which is the alchemist's role in whatever the hero's journey is. They can see patterns that other people in that world can't see. They can manipulate forces that others can barely begin to understand. And sometimes they use this power for wisdom, and sometimes they use it for domination. The alchemist archetype tends to operate from a morally gray space. The duality matters because every alchemist can either become a creator like Nicholas Flamel or an illusionist like Franz the Nazi funder. Now, tarot as a tool reflects this tension because the magician in the upright position often symbolizes being confident, experiencing mastery with something, and to a larger context in the macrocosm of things, manifestation itself. In the reversed, this card can point to deception, ego, manipulation, or a misuse of power, and modern storytelling loves this ambiguity. So let's talk about the pop culture alchemist that we see. And we're going to start with The Wizard of Oz because this is perhaps and forevermore one of my favorite stories, and I think one of the most spiritual things that we could ever dive into. That's neither here or there. In The Wizard of Oz, you have the four elements represented by our core four. You have the Tin Man who's looking for a heart. Okay, he's our depiction of the cup. You have the Scarecrow who wishes he only had a brain. He is our sword. The Cowardly Lion who is praying for the nerve. He is our wand. And then, of course, Dorothy, our homegrown girl from Kansas. She's Earth, of course, born and raised on Earth. She is the pentacle. And who are they going to see? None other than the wizard. Hello there, magician, alchemist, whatever you'd like to call him. Of course, this wizard is, in fact, a charlatan. He is the inverse of the card. While he does give our characters what they need, so to a certain degree, he is the alchemist on all fronts, he has manipulated all of Oz to become great and powerful when all he really is a man from Nebraska, okay? Who knows how to use smoke and mirrors and illusion to his benefit because he was a stage magician in Nebraska. That was his job. That's what he did. The man behind the curtain can't actually give our characters a real heart or a real brain or real courage. He certainly can't get Dorothy home because he doesn't have magic. It is only when these people are all together, the Wizard, aka the Alchemist, Dorothy the Pentacle, the Lion, aka the Wand, Scarecrow, the Sword, and the Tin Man, the Heart. It's only when those 5 things are together, paired with a little help from Glinda, who is acting as spirit. She comes in literally from above in a divine form of protection, the bubble, that the wizard himself can even go and get himself home. That's how Dorothy is able to do it. And there's also a message, obviously, in Dorothy having what she needs, everything she needs to shift her reality and get where she wants to go. So I would say that is perhaps my favorite depiction of Alchemist. But of course, we have Gandalf, who is maybe one of the clearest alchemist or magician archetypes in fantasy. And of course, Gandalf is from Lord of the Rings. He's more than a wizard. He is more than the spells that he is able to cast. Gandalf channels wisdom. He understands hidden knowledge. He understands divine timing. He understands forces far larger than individual characters can even begin to perceive when it comes to the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Like the Magician card, Gandalf connects higher cosmic truths to practical action, and he empowers the others that he meets along the way to become who they're meant to be. Then you have Doctor Strange. In modern superhero mythology, few characters embody the alchemist more directly than Doctor Strange. Stephen Strange begins in the reversed position. He begins as somebody who is considered egotistical or arrogant. He is obsessed with control. But after losing the use of his hands, he has to enter into a world of mysticism and sacred geometry. He learns about alternate dimensions. He's literally able to create portals to go to different realities, to go to different dimensions, to go to different planes, to go to different periods of time. And he's able to use this ancient knowledge to his greatest benefit, or to the benefit of the people around him, turning him into a literal superhero. And his only power is understanding universal knowledge. That's why I love Doctor Strange. Has nothing to do with the fact that Benedict Cumberbatch, who I also really love, happens to play him. This character mirrors classic alchemical transformation. He must destruct his ego before he reaches enlightenment. And this is challenging for him. This is the whole premise of his origin movie. Doctor Strange learns that reality itself is malleable, which is exactly the territory that the alchemist or the magician in tarot embodies. We also have Walter White. If you're looking for a non-magical, non-fantastical experience of this archetype, we have Breaking Bad. And arguably, this is a dark alchemist. He literally transforms chemistry into power and wealth. He changes substances by, cooking meth. But more importantly, he transforms himself, and not in a good way. The tragedy is that his pursuit of mastery of this thing actually corrupts him, and is a good example of what the alchemist in reverse, or the magician in reverse, would actually look like. This reflects the shadow side of this card because it is in there. People do use these powers for not good intentions. And so Walter White is a really good example of how knowledge without wisdom, without good intention, can truly damage one's ego. We also have Willy Wonka, somewhat fantastical in nature, right? Willy Wonka can be read as the alchemist as well. In Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, he creates the impossible through imagination, through chemistry, through illusion, through innovation. And he turns ordinary reality into something that is wondrous and whimsical. The factory itself is this alchemical laboratory where there's strange processes that are going on, right? All these different nonsensical things that don't seem like they could be quote unquote real. They're impossible inventions. When the alchemist is considered somebody who is wise, he is always going to challenge the morality of our heroes. And that is what Willy Wonka is, of course, doing. He is challenging the morality of the people that are there. And they are going through their own personal transformation through this experience, particularly Charlie. And last but not least, we have the most famous example of this archetype. Don't think I forgot him, Merlin. His mythology comes from a blend of early Welsh tradition, medieval chronicles, and later romance literature. In earliest stories, Merlin appears as a prophet and a wild, mystical figure who is connected to fate and to supernatural knowledge. By the 12th century, he was depicted as a court wizard who ends up helping to orchestrate the rise of King Arthur, who goes on to advise the Knights of the Round Table and engineers, of course, the Sword and the Stone prophecy. He is often depicted as someone who lives between worlds or different ideologies. Sometimes he's seen as pagan, sometimes he's seen as druid, sometimes he is part of Christian prophecies, sometimes he is considered a deeper part of Avalonian, of course, mythological sorcery, folklore, and obviously Arthurian legend. Many later stories focus on his relationship with the enchantress Morgan Le Fay, or Nimue, who is also considered the Lady of the Lake. In some versions, she imprisons him in a tree. In others, she just outwits him in her own way. And this specific part of his mythology is what transformed his message of the alchemist archetype, turning it from something that was once considered esoteric essence into a cautionary tale. And this, of course, is all happening during the rise of Christianity, where possession of spiritual knowledge now becomes demonized in the eye of the church. That's a conversation for another day, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that that's where a part of his cautionary tale transformation comes in for Merlin. In pop culture, of course, Merlin is a huge, huge pop cultural figure. He is one of the defining templates for fictional wizards. Almost all modern portrayals draw directly from this imagery of the long-bearded sage who mentors our heroes. He is a wielder of mysterious knowledge and a guide through mystical worlds. So characters like Gandalf, which we already talked about from Lord of the Rings, or Albus Dumbledore from Harry Potter, they all owe a clear creative debt to Merlin's specific influence on this archetype. Merlin has appeared in countless adaptations, including Disney's Sword in the Stone, the BBC series Merlin, John Borman's Excalibur, and many, many depiction of modern fantasy games, comics, novels. His character has evolved from a medieval prophet into a universal symbol of wisdom, ambiguity, and magical authority. And that is a huge part of why we are so connected to this idea of the alchemist even today. So let's talk about why the magician still matters and how to use this energy. The archetype has obviously survived centuries. Anything in tarot that we are talking about has survived for centuries at this point. We're fascinated by what the magician can offer us because the magician, or the alchemist, represents the ideology that ideas can become reality, that your suffering is not for nothing, that it can be alchemized into your ultimate wisdom, and that ordinary people can reshape their lives through knowledge and intention. In modern culture, if we were going to look around in our reality right now, that magic can become technology, it can be psychology, whether that is neuropsychology or quantum psychology or just regular old psychology. It can be science. It can be media. And if you're going one-to-one, it can be somebody's charisma. So how do we use this archetype outside of tarot readings or mythology or movies? At its core, the magician is about recognizing your ability to influence your reality through focus, intention, and aligned action. This card reminds us that ideas alone are not enough. The magician needs to be taking inspiration and turning it into something tangible, lead into gold, an idea into a physical experience in our reality. In real life, this can look like learning a new skill or trying something you've never done before. Starting a business. It can be challenging yourself to do something that you emphatically believe that you cannot, thus rendering your internalized self-belief useless, alchemizing your internal belief system. Because once you realize you can actually go and do that thing, your belief about yourself starts to shift, and that automatically starts to shape your reality. It can be creating art. It can be building confidence. It can be a deep sense of healing after a difficult period. And it can be finally getting to a goal that you have been postponing. All of these are surefire ways to shift your reality and your internal landscape in order to alchemize your life into something much more aligned. Remember that there are 4 tools on the table. They suggest that, like Dorothy, you already possess all of the resources that you may be overlooking. Your intellect, your emotion, your intuition, your creativity. Creativity is a key one. Your discipline, your relationships, your life experiences that have given you knowledge and specific resources in and of themselves. The magician asks you, what can you use that you already have, and can you use it more intentionally? The archetype also encourages awareness of your language, your internal language, language about the world around you, and your mindset. The direct correlation between our language and our mindset. Magicians in stories understand that words shape reality, which is why they are often spellcasters in these pop cultural senses. They are people who are able to use words to create spells that have an external thing happen in the world of whatever story we are in, right? In everyday life, that means that the stories we tell ourselves matter. That's what the magician in this context is here to teach us. If you are somebody who constantly says, I'm not capable of that, nothing ever changes, that's just how things are. That's not possible. I'll never figure it out. Those beliefs now become a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's what your reality is going to depict back to you. So the healthy version of the magician isn't this idea of blind positivity, but it is a conscious direction of your thoughts in order to shape your reality, in order to shape your beliefs, and therefore create something in your world that actually feels good to you. You don't have to continue to live in a that's just the way things are reality. The magician is here to teach us that we have the power, that we have the capability, and that all we have to do is decide what it is that we want to co-create with spirit, put our resources together, make sure they are balanced, and then figure out the language to create the spell. And that's what we are going to focus on when it comes to this card, when it comes to this energy. So if you have specific things that you're like, I want to alchemize this, or I want to create this, I would say drop it in the comments wherever you're listening to this. Drop it in the comments, and I will make sure to either shout it out next episode, or we'll do a little bonus segment, or I will comment back. Whatever it may be, we'll get to it. Don't worry. I won't leave you hanging. But this is really important energy to be working with. It's one of the coolest archetypes, I think, throughout tarot. Before we sign off for today, let's do our Q&A for the week, which was from Jess, who asked, how do I formulate my questions when I'm working with tarot? And I thought this was an important one when it comes to the magician, since the magician is all about connecting our words, right? The spells that we're casting into the external reality. So when it comes to asking a question of tarot, my personal belief is that the more specific you are, the more specific your answer will be, the more sharp your intuition will feel when you're working with the cards. So if you're asking something like, what kind of guidance do I need? That's a pretty big net. But if you're saying something more specific, like, what kind of resources do I need in order to deal with X, Y, or Z? What is the most immediate and effective action step that I can take on my journey right now? What is a piece of guidance that I have been ignoring that spirit eagerly wants me to know? You can ask really specific questions and you will get really specific answers. But the wider you cast your net, that's when 10 cards will pop out and you'll be like, well, I don't know what any of these mean. You are trying to get a specific answer. Of course, you don't always have to go for something super specific. You could pull a card a day, but then I would go specific for hello, what kind of information do I need specifically for today? And even that I think is kind of broad. I would say something like, what can I expect when dealing with the energy of today? What surprises might be in store, good or bad? I'd like to be prepared. What resource internally do I possess that is going to help me conquer today most effectively? Like, choose your words really wisely and make it as specific as possible, because then you are going to get a really direct answer from your cards. So hopefully that helps. Please send in your questions. I'm having a bit of a problem with my email, so I'm sorry, this is not out on all streaming platforms yet, but it will be once this problem with the email gets solved. So for now, you can send your emails to hello@juliaroseportela.com. That will be in the show notes. So if you want to submit a question, whether that is a question about the history of tarot, how to use tarot, how to engage with tarot, or just life questions that you want answered on this podcast, you can send them over to that email. I will be answering a question a week. I will see you next Wednesday. We are going to be talking about the High Priestess. We are continuing our journey through the tarot. I'm so excited. I love you all so much. Many, many blessings. Go alchemize your life.